Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Comics League podcast. Thank you for joining us for episode number 34. On this episode of the podcast, Angela and I are going to be discussing Umbrella Academy Season 2 on Netflix. We discussed Season 1 a couple of weeks ago, and that episode is in the feed now if you want to catch up there. And today we're going to be discussing Season 2. Just a couple of things to get in front of. The audio quality on this episode is not the greatest, both some technical issues, and then Angela also had a little bit of a cold, so there's some sniffles in there. I did my best to cut around it, and I know we said this at the beginning of our episode about Season 1. We are going to be referring to the character who, when the show came out, was called Vanya. We're going to be referring to that character as Victor to reflect the identity and transition of the actor Elliot Page. There are a few moments back when I was going through and editing it, there are a few moments when we slip and say Vanya instead of Victor, and I tried to eliminate or change those as best I could, but I think there's one or two times in there where I couldn't make the edit sort of line up in the way I needed to, but we try to do our best with that to reflect the actor, who the actor is now, and their wishes about that character and who that character is. So we're going to be referring to that character as Victor. And again, we do slip up at least once in this episode. So our apologies about that, but hope you enjoy the episode. Season 2 is, well, I think you'll hear it in our conversation, maybe a little bit more divisive between the two of us. There's a little bit more of a challenging one to dissect, and kind of an interesting narrative direction for the show after I think what we both thought was a rocky but like pretty strong and had some interesting stuff going for it Season 1. So yeah, I think we're gonna try to talk about this as positive as we can. It's not as high for either of us as the first season was, but there's still some good stuff in there, and I think we try our best to sort of focus on that and pick that stuff out. But without too much more for me, hope you enjoy this episode about Umbrella Academy Season 2, and we'll be back with our conversation after this short break. I was thinking, because for our last episode when we did this, we kind of went like episode by episode, and I think you read the Wikipedia summaries, and I think that episode I think that was one of our longer ones. And I don't think this episode needs to be that long. I think we've done it wrong if it is.
Yeah.
And so what I was kind of thinking is that instead of going episode by episode, is we kind of go like character by character and just sort of,
There's 7 of them, right?
Yeah, I guess Ben plays a pretty big role, but like,
oh, you just wait till Season 3.
We'll get to it at the end. I have an article here about like 9 questions about the ending in like Season 3, so maybe we can wrap up there. I think we go character by character because not a lot happens for like the first 6 episodes.
Yeah.
The first 6 episodes is really like,
let's go by their numbers. Like 1, let's start with 1.
Okay,
we can start boring.
We can start with 1. So that's Luther, right? And that's what I was going to say is, well, what is there to say about Luther this season? Like, what is there actually?
I don't really know.
He's
such a bonehead.
Yes. He does it. Do you think he gets worse, or I'm like, part of me is like, at the end, do you think he realizes at all that he's kind of a bonehead, and then he like kind of takes a back seat at the end, or were like, you kind of like, where did you end up with him at the end of Season 2?
I felt like if he wasn't there, I wouldn't notice.
It wouldn't have mattered, right?
Yeah, like all he sort of did was just like look at Allison all sad.
Yeah.
The whole time.
I don't even think he has a heroic moment in that final battle, does he? He doesn't like shield anyone, or like he doesn't do anything particularly, right, with his like super strength or whatever, right? He doesn't even do anything particularly like amazing, right? It's all kind of Ben and Vanya and 5 at that point, or Ben and Victor and 5 at that point. But yeah, so right, like Luther kind of has something interesting going at the beginning where he's like this enforcer guy, and I was like, oh, if they like kind of lean into him being maybe a bad person, or him being like really impressionable, right, in the way that he'll just listen to whatever somebody tells him to do, but like that gets dropped pretty quickly because he loses this big like fight that he was supposed to win, and then he spends the rest of the season kind of just running around and doing whatever 5 tells him to do.
Yeah.
I think something we'll get to is like how much character development actually happened this season, and I would say Luther is maybe in contention for, if not winning, like least character development, right? I think he's just literally the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has like a little...
Ooh, next. Boring.
Okay,
He's
we're
boring.
done with
I don't even
Luther.
care.
Okay. 2 is
Diego.
right?
Uh-huh.
So Diego like had some interesting stuff going on this season. He starts, right? I guess we should kind of say the premise, right? At the end of season 1, they all jump back in time to Dallas in the early 1960s, right? Like
1960 to 1963.
Okay, I was at 60
different times between then.
Yeah, but then eventually it all overlaps, right? Because the people who jump back to 1960, they live there for like 3 years, versus the people who jump back to 1963 like live there for a few months, but eventually they all overlap and meet up with each other. And they're there in November of 1963 when John F. Kennedy comes into town, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy is sort of this unifying event that they're all sort of circling around throughout the whole season. But I would also argue, like, I don't know how important that is, as much it's just a like, this is happening at a specific time and place, but like, does it really matter that it's that time and place?
Diego thought it mattered.
Yeah, Diego's the one who really thinks it mattered, right? He has this hero complex. He's trying to stop Lee Harvey Oswald from shooting John F. Kennedy, right? There's a picture they find a picture of their dad on the grassy knoll, so he's gonna like stop him. So that's kind of his motivating thing throughout the season. But the other thing is Diego finds a friend / like romantic interest lover, because in the first season, Diego's really he's pretty misunderstood by everyone else, right? Everyone thinks he's kind of just like, he's skilled, he can throw the knives and manipulate them. He's pretty skilled in that sense, but he's like a hothead. He doesn't listen to anyone else, and he has this like hero complex that sort of gets in the way, right? He has the moment in season 1 where he has this sort of cop woman who he's had sort of like a hot cold thing with, and she dies, and that sort of, kicks him into like revenge mode. But here he has a person who, is it Lila, right? Her name's Lila.
Yeah.
He has this person who he feels like very comfortable opening up with, right? We sort of see him acting more relaxed and normal around her than we have at any point in season 1. She is revealed to be a double agent, which sort of shuts Diego off again. But I don't know. He's like pretty... Diego's more like, I don't know if maybe reasonable is the right word, but he is like much more willing to work with the rest of the group this season than he was in season 1, right? I don't know if like a ton of like character growth happens exactly, but like he does seem more willing to be part of the group, at least, than he was previously. I don't know. What were your thoughts about Diego in season 2?
He was like almost better, or like almost more interesting. I feel like, I don't know, I didn't really like care for Lila, so wasn't really interested in like their scenes or whatever, so I was like, not important. But I feel like he also was still kind of just like still really hung up on the whole like JFK stuff, and so it's just like he's like one foot in the door of like being like cool again, you know?
I think Diego kind of, I find him a more interesting character, but I think he has a similar problem to Luther, in that, in the same way like Luther needs the validation of Hargreaves, their dad, or just some person that he looks up to, right? That he looks up to and says, this person is like more powerful than me, right? Or more important than me, and I'm willing to take orders from them. I think Diego has sort of a similar thing, but I like that we get at least like one episode here where, so there's a moment, right? He sort of has these couple of episodes where him and Lila are sort of working together. She thinks they're on her side. Five figures out that she's not, and that Lila is actually working for the handler who has her own motivations that we'll get to. But then later in the season, I think it's episode 6 or 7, the handler or Lila more specifically, like kind of sees Diego's value. She understands what he's good at, and she recruits him for a job at, what is it? Is it called the association or the foundation? What's the commission, right? She recruits him for a job at the commission, which is sort of the group that controls the timeline. And I thought that was kind of interesting because there you kind of see Diego working for himself without Five, without Lila, without someone like telling him what to do. And I think like there was kind of an interesting moment near the end when I forget exactly how it comes up, but he's talking to Five and he's like, yeah, they recruited me for a job too. And you sort of see Five's like shock at that like, oh, there's this other person that I wrote off as being unimportant and like mostly not useful except for this very specific thing that they're good at. But like, oh, actually they do have some like values and skills beyond what I can understand. And like, I don't know. I think Luther, I don't know if he can potentially be more interesting. Diego, I think like he could be if they gave him more to do or if he was like trusted with a little bit more responsibility, right? Because I even think he's kind of, the way he changes, right? Like the way he changes his opinion about Victor and like is pretty willing to forgive Victor for what happened at the end of season 1 and is like, he's not hot-headed or unreasonable about it, right? He asks Victor to like apologize and that's kind of it. And so I thought we like saw more from him, but again, I don't think Diego was given a ton to do, which was kind of disappointing, but you know, maybe in season 3 we'll get more from him, which would be cool. Non-committal. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, Allison. Do you want to start us off? What were your thoughts about like Allison's arc or kind of the journey she went on this season?
I feel like she had more stuff. She obviously, I guess, had more stuff to do than Luther and Diego because she like got married and then got super involved with the civil rights movement and like was like organizing sit-ins and stuff. I feel like especially in the beginning, I think we saw more of her. And I feel like especially when like she reunited with like Victor. I really liked when she reunited with Klaus actually. I thought that was kind of nice when she like, goes to the mansion. But like I feel like she seemed the most like into like sort of like healing, I guess, for relationships with Victor and like that seemed very important to her. But I think that she was sort of, I guess she also had, in addition to like Victor, had the most to sort of lose in this timeline because she was like married and everything. So that made it interesting.
I think Allison and Victor are the two characters that are like, other than those two, they could have kind of jumped back into the future at any point and place other than what they do with Victor and Allison, right? Like it matters that, and I guess Diego, like to some degree, Diego, again, I don't, he's very fixated on like this saving John F. Kennedy, but again, it doesn't really end up mattering. But Allison, right? She's involved in the civil rights movement. It matters that they're in the South, right? In Texas, in a place where Jim Crow went on way longer than it did in other places, right? And that there was this very violent and angry response to Black people trying to organize for their civil rights, right? And so she's at the heart of that, right? So it matters that they were at that time in terms of what goes on with Allison, right? And I think she spends maybe the longest there, right? She's there for a year or a little over a year. And yeah, she gets married. She finds, what's Allison's husband's name?
Raymond Chestnut.
She meets a guy named Raymond Chestnut because she's working at a salon where they cut hair, and this salon is also used as a organizing place for members of the Black community to talk about what's going on and what they're trying to accomplish in Dallas at that point. And I thought we only get like 5 minutes, and I forget what episode it shows up in, right? Their story of how they kind of meet, where like jumps back in time. She goes into that diner where there's a sign that says whites only. They chase her out. She runs into the salon and people from the diner are like chasing her. And then like the people from the salon like defend her and are going to like fuck someone up if they come in and mess with Allison. But at that point, she also can't speak, right? Because at the end of season 1, Victor cut her vocal cords or whatever. So that wasn't a permanent injury. I guess that was one of the questions that I had, but that wasn't a permanent injury. And I think it's kind of cute how like the first time that Ray talks to her, I don't know if we're supposed to understand like that's the first words that she's spoken, but like her voice is very like harsh and croaky, right? It really feels like she hasn't said anything in a long time and he's just asking her what her name is. And so it's kind of this like very loving, tender moment. And you also see scenes of her kind of sitting in the back, not part of their civil rights meetings, but like you can understand like she's listening to this, you know, maybe she didn't think about this or we didn't, you know, this wasn't a huge part of season 1, right? But she's like sitting there sort of slowly getting radicalized kind of to what needs to happen, right? What this group of people is trying to accomplish, and eventually becomes a leader of that group, or one of the leaders. And so I liked what they like did that. And those scenes are like pretty harsh, right? When they like organize the sit-in, I don't know, like they make it really uncomfortable to watch in terms of them going there, all of these black people going in, sitting at this lunch counter, and just like the hate and like anger that is directed at them, and sort of the way they depict that on screen with the people like spitting on them or like pouring the coffee or whatever. Like they make it uncomfortable to watch, and I don't think they sort of try to water down that depiction of what that would have been like in that time. So I think like, yeah, Allison has like has an interesting story in terms of sort of what she gets involved with, and then also kind of how that intersects with her power set, right? So she hasn't used her powers since she jumped back in time until, you know, but she sort of, all of these weird people keep showing up in her life, and Ray is like, I do like the moment. Who does he meet first? Does he meet Victor does he meet Luther first?
Klaus.
He meets Klaus first?
Yeah.
Right? He meets Klaus, and then I think he meets
Luther.
Luther. And he's just kind of like, how are these people? They keep saying that they're your brother. Like how is this? And I like the sort of like comedy that's played for right there. But eventually she has to like come clean and, you know, tell him what her power set is. And, you know, he has to ask her, like, did you ever use that on me? And I think, you know, something I don't think we talked about last episode is like how interesting actually are all of their powers. I think Allison maybe has like the most interesting one in the way that it's like it's like very powerful, but it has these like limitations, but also affects the way that like everyone in your life would have to second guess their interactions with you. Right? Because you see Ray asking that question. There's a moment when Allison, right, she's like using her powers again. She goes back into that diner and she tells it says whites only, and everyone's like staring at her and yelling at her to get out. And she tells the guy to pour a cup of coffee and like keep pouring it, and he's just like pouring burning coffee on her hand, and you just sort of see like the rage in her eyes, right, at these people who hate her, right? There's no other word. Like it's just pure hate. It's like this very strong thing, but it, you know, kind of makes Allison like question herself, right? And we got a little bit of that in season 1 with like the son, with her daughter and her husband, but I think it's hit home a little bit more here, like how sort of complicated that her powers do make her whole life. And then what?
I haven't watched season 3, bro.
So anything to add? It's coming up. Anything to add about Allison?
I liked watching her this season.
Why?
Yeah, because it was like, I think she was one of, aside from Klaus, because Klaus is always going to be my favorite, one of the more interesting siblings to like watch, and like I was actually interested in like her storyline and everything. So yeah,
I think they do a really good job, right? Like making her relationship with Ray very like you care about that, right? Like they do a really good job making you care about what's going on with her, what's going on with her like relationship, and what she's involved in terms of the civil rights movement in Dallas. Like they do a really good job of like pulling you into that immediately, so that anytime Allison is on screen, like I felt myself paying a little bit more attention versus like I wasn't always paying attention. And when it was like I like Klaus, I didn't really like what we're going to talk about in a second. I didn't really care for his storyline. Like, you know, Luther, it ended up not mattering. So I think they did a really good job with that. Like they figured out something interesting and compelling to do with her, and it worked really well.
And then they fucked it up. Season 3.
So Klaus is number 4, right?
Yes.
Is Ben 5? No, 5 is 5 and Ben is 6. That's right. 5 is 5. Okay, so Klaus is 4. Talk to me about Klaus, because he's your favorite. I like Klaus a lot. I think Klaus probably the best actor, but I don't know. I didn't love what was going on with him. So talk to me about Klaus.
He starts a cult basically, and then he also is like trying to like get, what's his name? Daniel.
I think it's Daniel. Dave.
He tries to stop Dave from joining the military or Marines. That doesn't really work out.
So who's Dave?
And also, Dave is the guy that Klaus fell in love with when he accidentally got tangled up with the briefcase business in season 1, because he was like transferred to the Vietnam War, where he met Dave. Dave died. Klaus was very sad. Also, Ben's just like with him, because like Ben's with him, and like they're kind of able to understand how they can like work together a little bit. Like I thought it was funny when Ben was lifting Klaus up when the old lady's mansion. So, like the old ladies thought that was funny. That's good.
He starts a cult, yes, but initially he tricks a bunch of old people into giving him money and a place to stay, right? And then it slowly turns into a cult. Yeah,
Destiny's Children.
Destiny's Children, yes. I did like that there's like a running, because he has this cult, and so people are always asking him for words of wisdom, and I do like that he's always just quoting, like pop songs from the 90s or 2000s, right? The one at the end when he's running away, and then he said, like, I've never heard this song, but he says like is it Backstreet Boys or NSYNC lyric, and then the song that he quotes just starts playing as this, like, I think there's like a little action scene that kicks off, but like it's very funny how Destiny's Children. I think there's a couple other ones he's just sort of quoting pop songs from the future that sound vaguely right? They sound like vaguely intelligent, but like not really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. This one was kind of frustrating because I felt like they were like, you know, oh, wouldn't it be like interesting if Klaus was like a cult leader, right? Like this sort of religious leader, right? That people vaguely looked up to for guidance, right? He has that sort of, he's charming, right? He's like very charming. He's very easy. He makes people like very comfortable. Like that kind of makes sense. But like it just seems kind of, like, I'm sure it won't in season 3 because of what the setup for season 3 is. I'm sure it won't be, but like it's pretty unimportant throughout most of the season, right? Like when we first see him, he's on the run, and then they show up eventually, but it's just like sometimes Klaus is back at the mansion with the rest of the people, the rest of the cult members who are like waiting on his every word. Like it doesn't kind of, yeah, I don't know. It just felt unimportant, right? In the first season, we kind of had Klaus going through, right? He's a recovering alcoholic. We sort of see this struggle over a couple episodes with him and Ben to get sober. We see his family members being various shades of like supportive and extremely dismissive of it. We see sort of how it manifests in how his sobriety or his struggle to be sober intertwined with his power, where like the ghosts of those random ghosts were popping up, right? Were those ghosts of people that he like interacted with, or I forget how
He
that worked
was in season 1?
in season 1. There was that episode where he was seeing like random ghosts of people.
Yeah, he could just see dead people.
He could just see dead people, yes.
Like, because he was seeing people who, like, remember when Hazel and Cha-Cha, like, that they killed or whatever.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I was about to say, I think it was ghosts of like people. Okay, so I was like, I don't think he killed those people. It was ghosts of people that Hazel and Cha-Cha killed, who were the like assassins from season 1. So it had there was this kind of interesting intertwining, right, of his power set and sort of his personal growth, right, or how he was trying to like develop as a person, and then like here he's just, you understand why he starts drinking again, right? It's after his attempt to confront Dave goes poorly, but it's just kind of pretty waved away, right? In like the first season, that was like a big thing for him, right? That was part of his character arc, and here it's just kind of gone, and it like isn't really remarked upon. It doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. It kind of felt like Klaus maybe went backward a little bit. I don't know. What do you agree with that, or do you think that's being too harsh?
Do like a whole lot of with his powers or anything really until I guess, like I said, nothing really like you said, nothing really happened until the last couple episodes.
Yeah, and even then it's like Ben kind of figuring out what he can do more than Klaus figuring it out even. Yeah
but I don't care, it's Klaus.
Do you agree with that? Do you think he's like the best actor in terms of like just on screen, like most interesting person to watch, even if he's not necessarily like if it's not the most interesting story? Or like, do you think there's someone who's you prefer watching more than Klaus?
No, I think him, and then my next would probably be 5. But also 5 can be kind of annoying. I guess that's like the point, but like,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, we can get to 5. I think that is kind of the point with 5, right? It's very much this person that's like perpetually stuck at this specific age, right? Like his brothers and sisters have all been able to move on, right? They've all been able to grow up or attempt to grow up to varying degrees. You know, some of them take that more seriously than others, but like 5 is how old is he supposed to be? Is he supposed to be like 12 or 13?
Yeah, but his like mentally he's like
58 or something.
50 or something.
Yeah. But it's still, but I don't even know if I get the sense that he's like an old person trapped in a young person's body. Like I just always kind of think of him like he's 12. I don't know. Do you get that sense, or how do you think about him? Like, cause he always says that and I'm like, I guess, but not really.
Yeah. Cause it's like, I could see in spots where they're trying to like make him say something old sounding here, but like, because it's coming from him and he's looks like I could like break him if I sat on him. I don't really believe it.
Yeah. They do that a lot this season where he's like, I'm the best assassin that the what's it called again? I'm forgetting.
Commission.
He's like, I'm the best assassin the commission ever had. And you're like, okay, I don't know if I totally believe that. Like, it seems like it would be pretty easy to beat you up. But yeah, so I feel like the age thing is always just like he knows a lot, right? He knows how the commission works. He knows what's going to happen in the future, right? He knows a lot of martial arts or whatever, but like you never get the sense that he's actually like a 58-year-old, right? Like he doesn't have it, even if they were going to be sort of very stereotypical about like what sort of mannerisms or like what would his like cultural reference points be if he was 58, right? They don't even try to give him that characterization in a very shallow sense. So yeah, he always just seems like a 12-year-old boy. So 5 is again kind of he's the person that knows the apocalypse is going to happen, right? That's sort of the unifying event, just like it was last season, right? 5 shows up and he's like, the apocalypse is going to happen in 6 days. He shows up back in Dallas. He finds everyone. He's like, the apocalypse is going to happen in 8 days. We got to figure out how to stop it. I don't know what's going to happen, right? So there's sort of all these various plans, right? One of their plans is trying to hunt down their dad. Another one of their plans is stopping himself, because the old version of himself was there to make sure that Kennedy did get assassinated, right? That history sort of went the way it was supposed to go. So they have all these like various plans, but again, 5 is kind of driving that. But I don't know. Yeah, like I think 5 kind of serves that same role, right? Like, I think he's the one who's kind of pushing the plot forward more than the rest of them. But like you know, he's the one who's kind of interacting with the commission all the time. So he's the one who figures out that Lila is working for the handler. He's the one who kind of, through his actions, figures out that the handler is not on their side and that the handler has been manipulating Lila to sort of use her powers for whatever her ends are. Yeah, there's like a lot of plot stuff that he does, but like, I don't know what it, like, none of it is super memorable for me. I don't know. Was there anything that sort of stood out to you about 5 in season 2, or?
I don't know. I got the feeling that it's like he's acting all annoyed that there's like another apocalypse or whatever, but I feel like I got the feeling I don't know. He's just like, I feel like the other siblings are kind of content to just like, I don't know. He was on like a sense of urgency, I guess.
I think you're absolutely right. But like, maybe we can kind of reflect on this. So like the first time you watched it, or even when you watched it a second time, like the plot setup in terms of like 5 shows up, tells them that there's an apocalypse in like a week. They have to do something to stop it. Like, do you remember like your response to just kind of hearing that, like, we literally are going through the same plot setup that we did the last time? Or like, how do you, reflecting on that now, like, how do you feel about that it plays out differently because it's a different time and place, but it's a lot of the same things happen quite literally. I don't know. Yeah. Did you have thoughts about that? Like, thinking about it now or the first time you watched it?
I guess the first time I watched it, I was like, all right, well then, like, how are they gonna make this different? And like, I did like the first season more compared to the second season, sort of because of that, because like, it was just like, I don't know, I think the first season's always better. Especially when you're trying to like do the exact same thing, because like, I see the parts where they were trying to make it different, but I didn't think it was like interesting. So
yeah, I think that took a lot of wind, like that took a lot of the like excitement for this season 2 out of it for me, when I was like, okay, we're running back kind of the same thing. Because I think it's even in like season 1, right? I think it's episode 1 that happens in, right? Where I think in season 1, 5 shows up at the end of the first episode and then it kind of jumps off. And I think here we're just kind of with 5 from the beginning, and it's like we see, because he jumps to the apocalypse, he finds Hazel Hazel gives him a briefcase and is like, you got to figure out how to stop this. And then Hazel dies or gets shot or something. And we're kind of off, right? And we understand pretty quickly that like, okay, another apocalypse, 5's going to go tell everyone that this thing is going to happen. He has to sort of convince them, you know, they're in the same, they kind of have the same response to 5 that we do, and that they don't take him super seriously because he is a 12-year-old boy. I think they also, in the same way that we're like, he's not a 58-year-old person, despite all of his protestations, like his siblings have the same response, and he has to like convince them that something is going to happen. But yeah, like the running back of the same plot, I think like was a bummer for me in those first couple of episodes. That like, okay, like it's going to be something different, but like it's not going to be that different. Like they didn't have a totally new idea. And I get something that I'm interested to see, because we're going to look at the comics in like a couple weeks, just like how do these compare between the TV show and the comics. But like I'm wondering how similar like those first couple of issues are with, you know, they're going through season 1 versus the second couple of issues where it's season 2. Like, are those plots really that similar? How much, or is that more of a TV something they did in the adaptation where they were just like, we're gonna have a really similar plot because that's easy. But 5 is kind of the driver of that plot in terms of getting everyone on board for figuring out how to stop the apocalypse. Which brings us to number 6, Ben, who has a much bigger role this season, I would say, which I was really happy to see. He gets to like talk for himself without Klaus, which I thought was awesome. They find some ways for him to do that. And yeah, I don't know, what were your thoughts about Ben and what they did with him this season?
I was a fan. I thought that just because like it didn't go anywhere, the part where he like started to have a crush on that one girl in the cult was like kind of weird, because like it didn't go anywhere. So it's just like, what was the point? I liked when Ben talks to Vanya, and I like Ben's like, okay, goodbye, off to the void or whatever, afterlife. Or I like that part. I thought that was nice. Also, because it's like apparently like, so, like I mean, like unlike r/Umbrella Academy or whatever, Victor and Ben apparently like had like one of like the strongest relationships when they were kids. So I like that we got to see them together.
Side question: there's like a flashback to Ben's funeral, and they get younger versions of all the actors to play, or they get like young versions of the actors to play each of them when they're like 10 or 11, right? When they're, maybe half as old as they are now. And I could not figure out who was who. When like they cut to the actor who was playing Klaus and he's talking to Ben, I was like, that is not what young Klaus would look like. I don't know. Did you?
Wait, really? I don't know what you're talking about. What was?
There's a scene. It's Ben's funeral, right? So they're all quite a bit younger, and I thought the young versions of the actors that they got for each of the characters, I don't know. I felt like they didn't look like young Diego and young Luther and young Klaus. I just like, I don't. That doesn't seem right for me. I don't know. Can you pull up any pictures?
Let me see. I'm watching it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know I guess I can tell which one is Klaus, the like one with kind of the bangs.
Doesn't like the young Klaus version have like a very like square kind of like or like a more square jaw than like older Klaus has? I don't know. I feel like Klaus and Luther specifically, I was like, that seems way off for me.
I could see Luther. I don't know who I'm looking at, but the one with like the dark hair.
But I did like that scene because I like how Klaus is so like, he just like turns around and like Ben's there, right? He's so like unperturbed, right? Or like sort of unfazed that he's just like, Ben is dead for everyone else, but like not for him, right? Like nothing really changes for him. I liked that sort of, this is sort of what it's like to be Klaus, right? Like these people that someone close to you that dies or anyone that dies, right? They're not really gone in the same sense that everyone else is. I like that sort of representation, right? Because then they're off just doing the same like kid shit that they were doing before, right? What does he say? He's gonna go pee in. They're gonna go pee in Dad's car, in the gas tank of Dad's car or whatever, right? It's just kind of like not much has changed, right? For Klaus and Ben in that sense. So I thought that was an interesting sort of representation of kind of what I guess how close those two characters are, like you were saying, right? Like they have this really close relationship that seems, by the time we get to the show when they're older, it seems a lot more antagonistic, but it probably wasn't always that way. And again, I think what we saw Klaus go through in season 1, right? Trying to get sober and dealing with loving someone and then like losing them and going through all of that, right? Like how that interacts with his power, and Ben being there, seeing him sort of make progress and fail and start again, and right, and how their relationship has developed into what we see over time. But yeah, then Ben gets this like nice little moment with Vanya where he's able to be like very honest with her, right? And kind of give us a little bit of background on why, I guess we don't know if Klaus sees other ghosts and Ben is just the one, or like exactly how Klaus's power works. Like, does he only see the ghosts that he wants? Is what's special about Ben that he's there all the time? But Ben tells Vanya that like he was scared to sort of fully pass on, right? He didn't want to go towards the light, and that's why he stayed. And that change, right? That like moment of change that he had to go through, he was really scared, and that's why he stayed, right? It wasn't to Klaus's. I like that moment too. That was really nice too, right? Despite what Klaus thinks, that he stayed behind because they had such a good relationship, it was actually out of fear, right? And Vanya doesn't have to be afraid anymore, right? I think like they tied a really nice bow on like Ben and Klaus's relationship and Ben's own personal journey and sort of what Vanya needed to do in that moment. I think they connected them all in a really like interesting way that like makes sense for where each of the characters are at that moment. And then Klaus, right? He like he's kind of so, I don't know if self-involved is the right word, but he's like, did Ben say anything to you before he left? Right? He kind of knew. And of course she tells him, right? So I really like that. I thought that was like cute, nice, but like also like some solid character development there. And then kind of a little preview for season 3. which again, we see sort of what the setup is going to be right at the end of episode 10. And Angela's seen season 3. I haven't, but Ben is not gone, or at least like a version of Ben is not gone, which I'm very excited about. We get maybe like,
it pays off.
Is it very
well? It
seems like it's very emo Ben. Is that true, or is that just, does he just have a bad haircut?
I mean, I didn't think it was bad.
It's a very like My Chemical Romance haircut or something like so I'm excited to see what they do with Ben in season 3. So he's not gone, which is awesome. Which brings us to Victor, our Victor, number 7. Yeah, what were your thoughts about Victor? You kind of mentioned before, right? Victor and Allison kind of had the best stories, the most to do this season. What did you think about what Victor was doing?
What did I think?
What did you think about the choice?
I guess not much.
What did you think about the choice to give Victor amnesia for the first part, so that Victor doesn't remember blowing up the moon? What were your thoughts about that specifically?
I was kind of just like, this is gonna just all come to a head, isn't it? And then it's gonna not be good. Like, I guess it would have been, his storyline would have been so very, very different if he'd remembered. So
yeah,
I don't know if it would have made it better. I think it just would have been like completely different, because I think, because like if he'd remember, I don't think he'd be with Sissy and Harlan and all of them. So I guess I
think I'm there with you. I don't know. I wouldn't second guess it, because I liked what they did with him in this season. I liked Victor's relationship with Sissy, the relationship with Harlan, what they kind of have to deal with, right? So in this season, Victor has a relationship with Sissy. It causes issues with Sissy's husband, right? Because he says that Sissy's husband tells Victor they don't want his kind around there, right? Being like very direct and making direct threats about how being gay or being LGBTQ was viewed in the 60s, right? Like there wasn't like, people weren't out like waving pride flags, right? This isn't a thing that was like talked about or accepted like in like broader culture. And so he does just threaten him and says, leave and don't come back, or like something bad is going to happen, right? And so I think in a similar way that they did with Allison's story, right? Like they don't shy away from showing the ugliness of like what was going on in the world at that time with Victor's storyline. But again, like it would have to be way different, right? If Victor remembered, oh, I blew up the moon and all my brothers and sisters locked me in a cell and like thought I was dangerous, right? And I think generally I'm not a fan of like amnesia stuff. Like it's such a big trope in video games. It's like, oh, I don't remember. I have to like discover all of my powers all over again, right? It's like the easiest setup because it creates a blank slate of a character, right? But I think they get to a place where Victor eventually does remember what happened, has to deal with what went on, and then has to get to a point where Victor forgives the brothers and sisters and himself, and sort of, again, has that moment with Ben where like it has to be okay, right? That the change that you have to go through, like, it's okay. And like crossing that threshold to whatever that other side is, it's okay. And Victor is able to make that decision for themselves without someone forcing them or someone telling them like what is going to happen, right? It's really just the support of their brothers and sisters, right? The fact that they all get into the car when Victor's like, I need to go check on Sissy, right? Initially they're like, no, but right, they all get into the car and go and are there together at the end. It just, because they chose to like give them amnesia, it has to happen like very quickly, as opposed to like something that plays out over the course of the season. So I think some of those like early episodes where it's just Victor and Sissy and Harlan in the house is kind of like, okay, what's going on here, right? Like they're on a farm, they're kind of isolated. So there's not a lot happening in those first couple of episodes, but I think a lot happens, but I think it's like the development and the way it plays out is like good in those last couple of episodes. Episodes like 7, 8, 9, 10. It just has to happen really fast with Victor. Yeah. Anything? Were you at all worried that it was gonna, again, because it's so similar to season 1 in terms of they are still sort of scared of Victor as being this bomb in a certain sense that can like both create and destroy? Like, I don't know, were you worried that it was going to go the same way that it was in season 1, or did you kind of, what were your like feelings as we were getting down to the end and we were getting to that same thing, like, oh, Victor's the problem again?
I was like, they're not gonna make it the exact same. That they can't. Like, these people gotta be smart, right? That they know that would be so boring.
You were more confident than me then. I was not sure. I was very like, I wasn't sure. I was like, is Luther gonna come back and be a dumbass again? Is Diego gonna go out? Like, I was like this. Yeah, I was not sure it wasn't gonna turn out bad all over again, right? Because it's so similar in terms of like everyone is scared of Victor so late in the season and looks at him as like, you're the problem here, as opposed to like, no, you're like beautiful, like the thing that you are is capable of creating life, right? We kind of see that when they bring Harlan back to life when he drowns, but you're also like capable of destruction, right? Like you contain so much inside of you, right? In like, I don't know, in a way that like we don't see from a lot of the other characters, right? I think Victor has, both because of what's going on, right? I think there's a kind of a lot of metaphor in terms of what's going on with the actor Elliot Page, who's like playing that character, which we'll probably talk about more in season 3, but like how that interacts with what that character is what that character is in the show is, yeah, there's just like, it's more, a little bit more dimensional than, again, someone like Luther or Diego, who just like haven't been given a ton to do so far, which is kind of disappointing, or even like 5.
And speaking of powers, kind of.
Yeah.
I thought it was so dumb that Lila's power was that she can copy other people's power.
That is like, it's very
That's
basic,
so
right?
Lazy.
It is very easy. I thought,
and also that she can like, because like you see with Victor that he kind of has to like learn how to like channel it and control it, but like suddenly she, like Lila has like perfect control over it.
You're absolutely right, but then it was also like, I don't know. I guess I don't know. It's like pretty, I was gonna say like, but then like she couldn't beat up 5. But I guess the way her powers work is she can only mirror one person at a time, right? So when she's, you know, facing off against Victor, she can do the stuff Victor's doing. When she's facing off against Allison, she can have the I heard a rumor powers. When she's facing off against 5, she can do the teleporting stuff. But it's like, yeah, I guess it's not super interesting, right? And she just is like, she seems to be instantly perfect at them in a way like we've seen. You're absolutely right, in the way we've seen other characters struggle to get to that point, which like that like works out in the future if we see her again in season 3, right? Does that come up? Is that like also her strength but also her weakness somehow, right? They kind of mention that, right? She can't mirror 2 of them at once. So that might come up again in season 3, right? Because she only ever faces them all like one-on-one, but not super interesting. But that's Lila. Again, she had sort of a relationship with Diego. Again, she lost her parents because the handler had 5 kill both of her parents because the handler knew what her power set was and was trying to accumulate children the same way that Hargreaves was, right? So Lila was born October 1st, 1989, the same that all of the Umbrella Academy kids were, right? She is one of those, is it 43? I think it was 43 kids that was born at the exact same time on the exact same day in the exact same year. So she's part of that. I guess we also had the handler this season, right? I don't know. Did you like the handler a little bit more of a character, right? Because we didn't have Cha-Cha and Hazel, right? We didn't have these 2 other characters from the commission sort of working to hunt down 5. Instead, the handler's doing it herself. What did you think about her and giving her a little bit more to do?
I don't know. Because I always just think that like anybody who's part of the commission, they're acting like the whole thing is just so like absurd. That it's just like, there you go, being you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like evil for evil's sake, or like power for power's sake, right? We don't ever know what she actually wants, right? She doesn't actually want a daughter. She wanted Lila because she knew what she could do. Mm-hmm. She's manipulating 5 the whole time. So yeah, she's like not, she's a little bit more of a plot point than she is like an actually interesting character with like stuff going on. But she's kind of our villain this season, or is revealed to be our villain. And then the other big characters. We haven't mentioned them at all. I don't know if that's because they're forgettable or not, but the Swedes, right? These 3 Swedish brothers who are being manipulated by the handler and being told to kill each of the Umbrella Academy students. And sort of they continue to be like thwarted or fail and sort of get knocked off slowly over the course of the season until there's one left. What were your thoughts about them as they're not really characters because they don't really talk, but as like a part
they barely talk, so like I don't even know.
They're like interesting the first time you see them, I think, but then they're a little bit comedic, right? Because they're like these big, tall, blonde Swedish men. I think they speak in Swedish the first time you see them. They don't speak any English. I think they're executing a hit on someone, or are they chasing down 5? I forget the first time you see them, but then they they fail, but they figure that their mission isn't over. So they like find a house in Dallas and they like go to this like cat infested house and sort of take it over. And it's all kind of like funny, right? It's that sort of like violence kind of played for comedy a little bit, but it just, they never go beyond being like a little bit of comedic relief, which is disappointing. I don't know. Like,
I didn't think they were that important. If they were, it's just like, who are you?
Yeah, I don't think they're that important, but I think something and maybe we'll wrap it up here. Something that they kind of are symbolic of for me with this show is like, there's a lot of like interesting ideas. There's a lot of like weird comic booky stuff, right? Like you learn that the person who's at the head of the commission is a goldfish that is in a robot body with a fish tank for a head, right? I love when you first see the goldfish and he's smoking and he's like holding a cigarette up to like a little grate and you see you see little puffs of smoke come out of his mouth in the fishbowl, right? It's just like weird and stupid. And I think the Swedes are kind of like that, but like the goldfish, the handler like destroys his body and swallows him eventually, right? He turns out to be pretty unimportant, right? The Swedes like slowly get knocked off by the Umbrella Academy over the course of the season. They turn out to be pretty unimportant. I don't know, like I guess sometimes I just wish the show was like a little bit weirder or like a little bit more interested in like the strangeness of all of it than it seems to be. I don't know. Do you ever feel like that, or do you ever like want more from it?
I either want more or I just want them to stop completely, because I feel like I don't understand why it's only a little, or like why they don't go further with it.
Okay. I think that's exactly right. It's like this very in between thing, right? Where like, and again, we'll look at the comics, right? And it's like, if you're going to like fully adapt and like make it weird, then like make it super weird, right? You can still have all of your character development and it be super weird. But if you're going to like just make a pretty straightforward show about like superpowered kids that can jump through time, then like do that, right? Like, I think you're right. I think the sort of like half measures kind of leave you like, does this matter at all? Right? There's like, or you just figure out, oh, I don't have to pay attention to this because it's not going to matter. Like, it's literally not going to matter once the scene's over. And I think there's kind of a lot of stuff that is like that, which is, I don't know. I find it frustrating. Do you find it frustrating, or is it just like annoying? How do you like?
It's just like, I'm not, because like I'm pretty difficult to get on board with like weird stuff in the first place, so that if I feel that it's like not important in the grand scheme of things or whatever, I'm not going to be particularly interested in paying attention to it.
Yeah. When you're watching the show, are you like fully like that's the only thing you're doing? Are you like kind of like second screening where like you can watch the Umbrella Academy and you can be like on your phone, or you can like be on your laptop, or like do you feel like this is a show where like you really need to like pay attention?
For some parts, I pull out my phone and do a little scrolly scroll on TikTok.
Who doesn't?
You.
Well, not TikTok, but I'll scroll through Twitter a little bit. But yeah, I guess that like if I felt like that stuff mattered and they were like really going hard with that stuff, I maybe would be less inclined to do that. But I do try to like then when that stuff comes up, and now I'm at this point where like I know like this isn't going to be a thing. And then I think that's it for season 2, right? So we end season 2 with the apocalypse being averted. History kind of goes as planned. JFK is assassinated. It's pinned on the Umbrella Academy, right? They think that the Umbrella Academy was helping Lee Harvey Oswald, right? They're sort of fugitives by the end of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few there's a few things about history that are different. The Umbrella Academy are fugitives. There's a cult. I don't know if the cult shows up in season 3, but Klaus did start a cult. This is the other thing, right? It's like what matters in this show? Like which of these things matters, right? There's like this scene where Dave signing up for the military played out a little bit differently in the past than it did the first time, right? He like did it on a different day, and Klaus has this little bit of like, oh, did something change moment? The handler's dead. Lila jumped with a briefcase. What else? What are the other big are there any other big differences that are Harlan, right? So the little kid that Victor was watching, he maybe has powers, right? We see him in the back of the car at the end of episode 10, sort of levitating a little toy. Yeah. Is there anything else that sort of sets up season 3, or is that most of it?
Yeah. I'm kind of trying to think about like what season 3 was, and like, is there any important information that we need to take away that we haven't already talked about?
I guess the other
Not
thing
really.
is they did meet Hargreaves, right? They met their dad in the past before he adopted all of them, right? Before they were all born and before he adopted them, and like told him, we're going to be your kids in the future and you're going to like do all this stuff. So he has knowledge of that going into the future, which seems right. So why don't you tell us what happens at the end of episode 10? What at the end of episode 10?
They like go forward in time.
Yeah, they go forward in time.
And then they go to the Umbrella Academy, so now it's the Sparrow Academy, and there's 6 new children. Well, 5 of them are children, one of them is like a block, and the 7th is Ben. Okay. And it's like, we're the Sparrow Academy, what are you doing in our house?
Yeah.
And then the Umbrella Academy's like, what?
And I think, so they jump back to 2019, right? They jump back to the day after, like, they jump back to 2019, but Victor didn't blow up the moon, right? It's like April 2nd, right? So like that crisis was averted. That crisis never happened. But now there's the Sparrow Academy. They jump back to the Umbrella Academy. And I think Hargreaves, when he sees them, I think he says, I knew you would show up one day, right? Like he was kind of aware that the future was going to go differently somehow. So we'll see how that plays into it. But yeah, so it seems to set up this like Umbrella Academy versus Sparrow Academy, which is potentially another group of powered kids that were all born on that same day in 1989. We'll see, but hopefully not another apocalypse. Hopefully that's not the plot. Is that, can you just that's the one thing I want to know for season 3. Is there another apocalypse that needs to be avoided?
I don't remember.
Okay, Angela doesn't remember. All right. So that's Umbrella Academy season 2. Probably not as good as season 1, right? Season 1's better, we think. I think I would say that. Season 1's better. Yeah. Okay. We'll see how season 3 is. I don't know if they're going to make more of this because Netflix is sort of reprioritizing what shows get made and everything. So I don't know if we're going to get a season 4. This season 3 might be it, but we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. Right now, we're going to take a short break and then we'll be back with our one-shots. See you in a second. And we're back with our one-shots, and you're going to go first. What is your one-shot for this week?
Season 2 of Only Murders in the Building. That's what I was watching, and I couldn't jump on right away.
Okay, that was probably going to be mine. I also finished it up before this. What do you think? What are your thoughts on season 2?
I'm only at the 3rd episode, so now I'm just feeling kind of sad for Bunny.
Okay.
Especially, did you watch season or episode 3, right?
Yeah, I've watched episode. I think episode 6 came out yesterday, so I've watched as many as there are so far.
I thought that was when like she was trying to hang out with him. I thought that was pretty sad.
Yeah. I don't know. So I have to rewatch season 1 because like it was on and I was in the room, but like I don't have a good sense of like what happened. I remember feeling like the characterizations of the three main characters. So Mabel, Brazos. What's Mabel and who are the other two? What's the names in the show?
Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Yes, whatever.
I don't know
Gomez.
which one is which, but at this point, I don't want to know.
Oh, so Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, Martin Short. I felt like their characterizations were a little bit like inconsistent. And maybe I felt that most specifically with Selena Gomez versus like being this like super sad to like kind of like, you know, interesting like hipster person. I felt like it just like oscillated a little bit. And I was like, who are you? But I feel like they've really settled into they've settled into their characters, right? Like Martin Short is, you know, he's kind of energy. He's a little bit of like chaos. He's the messiest person on the show. We're getting a lot more about Brazos. Steve Martin's character, like kind of, you know.
Dang.
Well,
now
you'll forget. It doesn't matter.
I figured the short one was Martin Short.
The short one is Martin Short. Did you watch the episode where Steve Martin's daughter shows up yet?
No, shut up.
Okay, so I don't want to spoil. That episode's really good. We're getting a lot more of like, oh, this guy's like not like a bad guy, but like, I don't know. There's like a lot of stuff, right? It's just like all more complicated and it's like handled with like, I think the comedy's a lot stronger just because those characterizations are much more solid, right? Like I think the thing with like Mabel where she's kind of now is sort of this weird, like famous, infamous person on the internet that attracts like these weird types of people is interesting. I think they've sort of, I didn't particularly love in season 1 when they had the fans of the podcast sort of interacting with the podcasters at the end of it and how they sort of affected it. I think they found a good like middle ground for what the role of like the fans of the podcast are in this season. And so I think like overall it just feels like a little bit more consistent is not the right word. It just feels, I think, cohesive. It just feels like it's all working together a little bit better, like because things are more settled than I felt they were in the first season. So yeah, Only Murder. Yeah, it's really good though. Like I wasn't super in on season 1. Now I have to go back and watch it, but like I'm absolutely loving season 2.
Have you been watching The Bear though?
I finished The Bear.
Thoughts?
That episode 7 is the one that starts with the Sufjan song, but the way, have you read anything about that episode? Have you like looked at what people are saying?
No.
Do you remember? Does that one stick out in your mind at all?
That's not the last one, right? It's like the second to last.
It's the second to last one.
That's the one where everyone goes crazy.
Yeah.
And like, girl, I don't know.
They all quit.
I felt like, yeah, the girl and the guy. I forgot
Sydney and the baker. I forget his name.
Was his name like Marcus or something?
I think it might have been. You keep going. I'll look it up.
I thought that like, I get that like Carmi like reacted very aggressively, but it's just like it was Sydney's fault that they were in that mess, and like Marcus should have been doing his job. So like I don't understand why they took all that time to like be like, oh, Carmi's a little bitch, even though it's like you guys are being little bitches for talking about that and like not admitting that it was kind of your fault.
Yeah, I do like. I think the only thing I would be critical of the show is like this is not the best. Like, what is this restaurant? What is the like? Because they're open in the evenings and they're open late into night, right? So it's very much a like dinner drunk food place, right? Because they sell these like great beef sandwiches, right? And
yeah,
but like they also have the ability to just pay a guy to like bake donuts and cakes, right? Because they're not open for dinner, right? So why do you need donuts, right? So like I think there is a little bit of like messiness with like what type of restaurant is this exactly? But yeah, I think I think you're right in terms of like I think that sort of makes it a little bit messy when it's like, well, why are they so upset at Carmi because they weren't doing their job, right? Like Carmi was absolutely an asshole, but like how was the baking like, guy helping out with everything that was going on, right? It makes that discussion a little bit messy, I think. But so
what are they saying about it?
Oh, so episode 7, that's like, I mean, I'm gonna love it because it starts with that Sufjan song. It starts with Sufjan singing Chicago over like images of people
Chicago.
like going to Chicago, right? People going to work at the restaurant early in the morning, right? It's like, it's beautiful. It is. It's Sydney and Marcus. You were right. But that episode, there's no cuts. I don't know if you like noticed that, but the camera never like cuts from one scene to the other, right? It's all one long continuous shot. And like the way tension builds in that episode, where you're seeing everything play out in real time, right? You're seeing the like 40, because that episode's like, it's the shortest one. I think it's only like 22 minutes, like 21 or 22 minutes, right? But you're seeing like 20 minutes right before service starts, and it's like their first day using like DoorDash, right? Or
like
whatever
DoorDash,
the online ordering thing is, right? And it's like, oh, like, I don't know. I just love how this show finds tension and like, I don't want to say conflict because I like seeing people yell at each other, but they find tension and ways for characterization to come out in like the smallest little things, right? Like, oh, what would happen if you were using DoorDash for the first time in a restaurant, right? And if you didn't, Sydney, right? The thing is, Sydney forgets to program it. So all of these orders come in at once because people were pre-ordering. And right, how does Carmi react and how does Sydney react? And what Marcus is fucking making donuts, right? And he made the best donut, right? He made like the best donut, and like just like how everything comes together. And like I was like getting nervous inside of myself while that episode was going on, because then you just see like when they turn the DoorDash thing on, like all the papers coming out, and you're like, there's not enough food. And it just, you like understand, even though the stakes are pretty small, right? Like, I don't want to say super small because these are these people's jobs, right? But like relatively the stakes are pretty small, but you like understand what they are perfectly, right? You understand they don't have enough food. You understand, oh, if you're fucking with people on DoorDash, right, they're going to say shitty things online, and right, that has this effect. It combines all that in like a really interesting way, I think. And like, yeah, I love that show. I loved it. I also
the next day I watched Burnt because I was like, shows. I did not like Burnt.
Is that the one
different vibe
with
That's the guy with the really blue eyes.
Yes, and he's a chef in like France,
trying to get a Michelin star. Or something.
And his one chef fucks him over, right?
Yeah.
I do. That movie's ridiculous because it's based on a book. I think it's based on a book, and like I think they're not very like accurate to the book in terms of what happens. But yeah, I think it's a little bit more comical. Like I don't know if I remember people talking about like, I don't think that wouldn't actually happen in a kitchen where like you would be sabotaged like that, right? Because doesn't he like intentionally mess up that sauce or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what happens in that one?
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Chef, the movie Chef?
Yeah.
I think that I like that movie. But yeah, Bear, very good. I also love how Carmi and Richie just hate Carmi's sister's husband, who's like a perfectly nice person, and they just hate him so much. It's also sneakily like a very funny show, I think, at times. The Bear. So I guess that's 2 shows, right? Only Murders in the Building season 2 and The Bear. And they're making season 2 of The Bear, which is awesome, right? Because he starts his new restaurant called The Bear. And so that is going to be, apparently that's like pretty far along in development, actually. Like, so season 2, not as far away as we might think, which is awesome. But yeah, those are our one-shots for the week. Let me pull up our end of show notes. Do you want to do them this weekend? Do you want me to do them?
I don't want to do it.
Aw, you haven't done them in so long. Anyways, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Comically Podcast. You can follow Angela on Goodreads by searching Angela Glowacki, or Letterboxd by searching Congli, that's CONGLI, or on Twitter by searching @Congli was taken, that is CONGLI was taken. You can follow me on Twitter by searching @Joey Glowacki, that's JoeyGlowacki. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast listening app. All reviews are greatly appreciated and help our show grow. You can get in touch with us via email by sending your feedback or questions to podcast@comicsly.com. You can listen and give a thumbs up to episodes of the show on the Comicsly YouTube channel. You can find our channel by searching Comicsly on YouTube or following the link in the show notes. There you can also find past streams from our Twitch channel along with other great videos. The music you heard in this episode is a lo-fi remix of the song Don't Ever Forget by Mecha Imperfect. You can find their music on Bandcamp and YouTube. There will be links in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode, and hope you join us again next week. Bye.
You messed up that last word. I heard that.
I did.
You have to keep it in now.
I'll keep it in.